Welcome back to the podcast. I'm Leo.
And I'm Emma. Thanks for joining us today. We've got a powerful motivational episode for you. Seriously, this one might change the way you think.
Today, we're talking about something every successful person understands deeply. Nothing is impossible, and failure is not the end.
Absolutely. We live in a world where everyone wants instant results. If something doesn't work the first time, people think, oh, maybe it's not for me, and they stop trying.
But here's the truth. Failing many times is normal. It's part of the journey. If it doesn't work the first 10 times, good. You're learning, you're growing, you're building experience.
It's funny because when people hear nothing is impossible, they usually roll their eyes. It sounds like a bumper sticker or a cheap Instagram caption. But if you actually unpack the psychology and history behind that phrase, it's not about magic. It's about probability and persistence.
Right? It's not saying I can flap my arms and fly to the moon right now. It's saying that barriers we think are permanent are usually just temporary lack of knowledge or effort. But Emma, I want to challenge this idea of instant results you mentioned. Why are we so obsessed with getting it right the first time? Is that just a cultural thing, or is our brain wired to hate failing?
It's actually biological. We are hardwired to view error as a threat. There's a fascinating concept in neuroscience called reward prediction error. Basically, your brain is constantly making predictions about what will happen. If I do X, I will get Y reward. When you don't get that reward, when you fail, your dopamine neurons drop their firing rates significantly. It literally feels like a withdrawal. It hurts.
So when I try to learn a new language or start a business and I fall flat on my face, that physical sinking feeling isn't just my ego, it's neurochemistry.
Exactly. But here is the critical part that most people miss. That drop in dopamine is actually a signal for neuroplasticity. It's the brain's way of saying, attention, there is a gap between what you know and what you need to know. You cannot learn without that arrow signal. If you succeeded every time, your brain would never rewire itself. Failure isn't just a stepping stone. It's the biological trigger for learning.
That completely reframes the experience. Instead of thinking, I'm stupid, you should be thinking, okay, my brain is flagging a gap. But let's look at the real world. Biology is one thing, but social pressure is another. We see these shiny success stories and assume they were straight lines.
The straight line myth is so dangerous. We edit out the struggle. Take James Dyson, for instance. Everyone knows the vacuum cleaner. It made him a billionaire. But do you know the actual number of prototypes he built before he got the first one to work?
I've heard it was a lot. Maybe a few hundred?
Try 5,127. He spent 15 years in a coach house building 5,127 failures. He was relying on his wife's salary. They were essentially broke. And every major manufacturer in the UK rejected his idea because they wanted to keep selling replacement dust bags.
5,000 failures. Imagine failure number 4,900. You've been at it for over a decade. Most rational people would say, Leo, stop. It's over. Go get a job. What separates a James Dyson from someone who just quits at prototype number 10? Is it stubbornness?
It's not just stubbornness. It's what psychologist Angela Duckworth calls grit. She did this incredible study at West Point Military Academy. Every year, thousands of cadets join, and they go through this brutal training called Beast Barracks. It's designed to break you. Duckworth wanted to know who would survive and who would drop out. She looked at SAT scores, physical fitness, leadership potential. None of it was a reliable predictor.
So the smartest kids and the strongest athletes were still quitting.
Yes, the only reliable predictor was their score on her grit scale, which measures passion and perseverance for long-term goals. The people who succeeded weren't the ones who found it easy. They were the ones who had a specific mindset. I don't care if I fall. I care about the destination. Dyson didn't see 5,000 failures. He saw 5,000 ways how not to build a vacuum, which eventually left him with the one way that worked.
I love that distinction, but I want to play devil's advocate for a second. There is a danger here, right? If I'm trying to become an NBA player and I'm 5'2", no amount of grit is going to make me dunk like LeBron. Isn't there a point where nothing is impossible becomes a delusion?
That is such an important nuance. Blind persistence is delusion. Smart persistence is adaptation. This is where the growth mindset comes in. Carol Black's research. If you just keep doing the exact same thing that failed 50 times, you aren't persevering, you're stagnating. Dyson didn't build the same prototype 5,000 times. He tweaked it. He analyzed the data from the failure and changed a variable. Nothing is impossible applies when you are willing to change your approach, not just your effort level.
So it's about being a scientist in your own life. You're running experiments. If the experiment fails, the hypothesis was wrong, so you form a new one. You don't just smash the beaker on the floor and cry.
Precisely. And sometimes the timeline is much longer than we want to accept. The most powerful example of this in recent history is Catalin Carrico. Do you know her story?
The name rings a bell. She's the scientist behind the mRNA vaccines, right? For COVID?
Yes, but her backstory is heartbreakingly difficult. She started working on mRNA technology in the late 1980s. At the time, the entire scientific community thought it was a dead end. They told her it was impossible to use mRNA therapeutically because the body's immune system would just destroy it immediately.
So she was swimming upstream against the entire consensus of her field.
It was worse than that. She was working at the University of Pennsylvania, and because she couldn't get grants, because nobody believed in her idea, she was demoted. She was literally kicked off the tenure track. She was making less money than her lab technicians. At one point, she had a cancer scare, her husband was in Hungary, and her boss essentially told her, give up this mRNA thing or leave.
Wow. Talk about the universe giving you a sign to quit. Demotion, health scares, financial struggle, no respect from peers. Why did she stay?
She believed the data. She knew the mechanism could work if she could just figure out how to bypass the immune response. She kept pushing for decades. It wasn't until she met through Weissman at a photocopier, a chance meeting, that they started collaborating. They finally cracked the code in 2005. But even then, it took another 15 years before the world realized how vital it was. When COVID hit, her failed life's work saved millions of lives and won her a Nobel Prize.
That is heavy. It really puts our daily complaints into perspective. We get discouraged if a TikTok video doesn't get enough views, or if a client says no to a proposal. She endured 30 years of professional humiliation because she knew she was right.
And that brings us back to the core idea. Failure is information. For Carrico, every rejection letter was just noise. The signal was the science. When we say failure is not the end, we mean that failure is an event, not an identity. You fail at a task. You are not a failure as a person.
That distinction, event versus identity, is crucial. I think men specifically struggle with this. We often tie our worth to our output. If the business fails, I am broken. How do we break that mental link?
It helps to look at high performers in high-stakes environments. Look at elite athletes or special forces. They do something called an after-action review. When something goes wrong, they don't shame themselves. They sit down and ask, what was the plan? What actually happened? Why was there a difference? And what do we do next time? It's clinical. It's unemotional. If you can treat your life like a project you are managing, rather than a reflection of your soul, you can take risks without being terrified.
I like that. Detach the ego from the outcome. But let's be real, Emma. Sometimes you run out of time or money. We can't all be Dyson with a supportive spouse or Carrico with a university position, even a tenuous one. What about the person listening who is working 2 jobs, tired, and feels like they've hit a wall? Is keep going always the right advice?
That's the hardest question. Sometimes keep going means pivot. If you are banging your head against a wall, maybe you need to look for a door. But the goal doesn't change. The path does. Let's say you want to be a musician, but you can't pay rent. Maybe you stop touring and start writing for other people. Maybe you teach. You are still in the music ecosystem. You haven't quit the dream. You've adjusted the logistics. That is still resilience.
It reminds me of that quote. I think it's attributed to Confucius. It does not matter how slowly you go as long as you do not stop. The speed is irrelevant.
Exactly. And often the breakthrough happens right after the moment of maximum despair. There's a phenomenon called the near-miss effect in gambling, which is negative. But in success, it's often true that the hardest resistance comes right before the breakthrough. It's like lifting weights. The last rep, the one that makes you shake and want to drop the bar, is the only one that actually builds the muscle. The first 10 easy reps didn't change your body. The struggle changed your body.
So the pain of the failure is the evidence of the growth. That's a tough pill to swallow when you're in the middle of it.
It is, but look at the alternative. If you quit, you guarantee the failure. That is the only mathematical certainty. If you quit, the chance of success drops to 0%. If you keep going, the chance is non-zero. And as long as it's non-zero, anything can happen.
I want to circle back to the "nothing is impossible" quote. We've talked about science and grit, but there's also a cultural legacy here. Think about the 4-minute mile. For decades, doctors said it was physically impossible for a human heart to sustain the pace required to run a mile under 4 minutes. They said the heart would explode.
Roger Bannister, 1954.
Right. Roger Bannister runs it in 3 minutes, 59.4 seconds. But here is the crazy part, and this is my favorite fact about limits. Once he proved it was possible, how long did his record last?
It was barely 6 weeks, wasn't it?
46 days. And then John Landy beat it. And within a few years, dozens of runners had done it. The physiology of human beings didn't evolve in 46 days. The only thing that changed was the belief barrier. They saw it was possible, so suddenly it became possible.
That is the perfect analogy for our listeners. Whatever you are struggling with, learning English, starting that company, getting fit, you might feel like you're facing a biological limit, but you're probably just facing a Bannister barrier. You just haven't seen the proof yet.
So how do we operationalize this? We've got the theory. If someone is listening to this on their commute, feeling stuck, what do they do tomorrow morning?
First, reframe the language. Catch yourself saying, I can't, and change it to, I haven't figured it out yet. That little word yet adds a future possibility. Second, analyze your recent failures without emotion. Write them down. I tried to sell the product, the client said it was too expensive. Okay, that's data. Is it too expensive, or did you fail to communicate the value? Test the next variable.
And I'd add, find your tribe. You mentioned Carico found Weissman. Dyson had his wife. You need people who aren't going to just comfort you, but who will push you. If you hang around people who give up easily, you will give up easily. Mirror neurons are real.
Absolutely. You need people who normalize the struggle. If you're in a room where everyone pretends to be perfect, you'll feel insane when you mess up. If you're in a room of builders and creators, they'll look at your failure and say, cool, what did you learn? Let's try again.
Success is not a straight line. It's a messy, chaotic scribble that eventually trends upward. And you are stronger than you think. You've already survived 100% of your bad days.
And remember, you don't know how close you are. That's the scary part. You could be at failure number 5,126. The breakthrough could be tomorrow, but you'll never know if you stop today.
If things aren't working right now, don't give up. Try again tomorrow. Try again next week. Try again next month. Success is not about talent. It's not about luck. It's about persistence.
You can achieve more than you imagine if you decide not to quit.
So whatever your goal is, learning English, changing your life, building a new career, moving to another country, remember this: nothing is impossible for someone who keeps going.
We believe in you. Now it's time for you to believe in yourself.
Thanks for listening. If this episode motivated you, make sure to like the video and subscribe.
And tell us in the comments, what goal are you working toward right now? We'd love to hear your story.